So ladies and gentlemen, now we're going to head back home and talk more about digital payments. It's something we've been right on top of here on ET Now. So last week, we analyzed the data that had been put up by the Reserve Bank of India, which showed the resilience of the UPI. The UPI from March versus May was down 2.8% in transaction values, whereas NEFT, RTGS, debit cards, credit cards, they were all down 30 to 40%. Today, the UPI's creator, the developer, National Payments Corporation of India, came out with new data on its website, which shows the market share of third parties. It also shows the breakup of how, when you look at all the UPI transactions, how much was person to person and how much is a person to a merchant. That means a person to a kirana store, a person to a shop, a person to an e-commerce website, a merchant. And what it shows is, and this is really, really interesting, that even though the total volumes are down, March versus May, what's not down are transaction values. Transaction values from March versus May actually went up over 5%. From April to May, it's actually up by almost 6%. What's going on? Why is that the case? Joining me to talk about that is Jitendra Gupta, the founder of Jupiter. You all know him well. He's stalwart in his own rights when it comes to digital payments. Thanks a lot for joining us here on this edition of Startup Central. I'll say it right up front. I'm really envious. You're joining us from an orchard in Himachal Pradesh. I can see a little bit of the trees. But jokes aside, what did you make of this trend? UPI transaction values going up, person to merchants. What would you attribute this to at a time when we saw partial lockdowns, when we saw mini lockdowns across the country?
So Nayantara, first of all, thanks for inviting on this call. I think it's a very obvious phenomena which is happening from a consumer side about the transaction value being maintained in terms of the overall transaction value. Because I think because of the lockdown, consumers are stepping out lesser. What that means is they are purchasing more. The basket size is large, so you see a clear impact where the number of transactions have gone down, but the value of the transaction remained constant or slightly gone higher. So it's more of a factor of consolidated purchases which consumers are making.
But then going by what you're saying, we should have also seen this last year, and that's when we saw headlines like, UPI down 30 to 40%. So why this time? Is it because the lockdowns weren't as strict?
No, so you'll be surprised. This phenomena was there last year in April, May, June. And after that, right, the lockdown was not strictly implemented after June. People started stepping out. So we saw the reversal in trend. But April, May, June, if you pick out the data, it's exactly like this in last year.
Okay. Somewhere else where we're seeing the data being very similar, it is in the market share of PhonePe, then Google Pay and Paytm. We all know how going forward the NPCI is going to be capping market share. Now, if this is the trend, and this has been the trend with, as far as the market share goes now for a while, how will we see the new guidelines pan out, and what is it going to do to the ecosystem if every player's market share is going to be indeed capped, and most of them are above that level anyway?
Yeah, so that's a very, very tricky question you're asking me. In fact, even the industry guys are wondering what will happen with the new guidelines coming in place. And there are various permutations, combinations. People are assuming that maybe PhonePe will have to decline new customer onboarding or stop transactions of few existing customers. So I think it will be very interesting to see what happens. I don't think NPCI has given very clear, very good clarity in terms of how they're going to tackle with this situation, because it's definitely going to cause some bit of trouble to consumers ultimately. But I think another interesting point I'll make is that almost every consumer today has 2 UPI apps in their phone. So at least 2, if not more. So they will have either Phone Pay, GPay, they'll have either Phone Pay, Paytm, or Phone Pay, or any bank app. So I would expect that people would still not be making hue and cry that their transactions are failing if the real cap comes in, and they would still be using other apps to complete their transactions. Of course, there will be little bit of annoyance at the time of transaction failure if that gets implemented. So I think I would expect that kind of a behavior shift happening between the apps.
Okay. Now, even as this behavior shift between apps is going to take place, I'd like to tell you that we actually had the NPCI COO, Praveena Rai, on the show just a few days back. And what Ms. Rai did tell us was that UPI is nowhere close to plateauing. Yes, almost one-third households are using it, with 25% from the lower income group. And the next big trigger could actually be feature phones. As someone who's grown up and is so respected in the digital payment system, feature phones and UPI, they'll have a good connection together?
I mean, it has to be seen. You know, if you remember, there used to be this USSD technology, which IMPS transactions used to happen on that, and somehow it never took off to a scale where one could say it is a successful pilot. And looking at the trend of UPI and the way UPI authentication works, or the way the seamless experience work on the smartphone, if you're not able to deliver a similar experience on a feature phone, in my view, personal view, I doubt it will work.
Okay.
So I'm quite skeptical on that, looking at the trends which happened in IMPS transactions a few years back.
You're talking about *99#, you know, when you can, you used to have to message that and you get an interactive menu. I think you were talking about that.
That's right. It never took off. I mean, it just had some scale and then it died.
Yeah, it didn't. So let's see how it does take out. We've seen some new technology just come out. Remember, the NPCI had a hackathon actually, which recently turned unicorn. Gupshup One is trying to come up with some tech for feature phones. The next big trigger, Jitendra, I'd love to get your views on. Mobile interoperability, wallet interoperability. Can this be the next big trigger? The RBI has mandated it. Can this be the commercial moment for UPI?
Actually, I don't think so. Directly speaking, I don't think so. So, because I think the interoperability, if you look at it, it is more about transferring from one instrument to another instrument. And I would see it like a very similar behavior. You know what the RBI did in the ATM transactions, where they introduced the interoperability, where, you know, any bank customer could go to any bank ATM and withdraw the money. But did it mean that the more ATM transactions started happening? I don't think so that happened. So I see a similar behavior here, where yes, there could be there could be marginal impact, but I am not sure whether it would cause UPI transactions to accelerate. There could be very marginal impact.
Then can I ask you, what can be the next trigger of growth for UPI and for digital payments? Because the NPCI itself says that it's, you know, pretty much addressed the entire smartphone market.
So I think one of the things which even NPCI has been contemplating, or even regulator has been contemplating, that I think the credit behavior on UPI is what is still not being explored. And in my view, if that comes in, where the delivery of credit can happen over UPI, or the UPI could be used as a instrument of credit card equivalent product, you would see a new segment opening up completely. So I personally feel that is a real opportunity which lies in UPI as a rail, which has not been explored so far.
I'm going to leave it at that. Thanks so much for joining us on this edition of Startup Central.